Ouija boards, home intruders, sleep paralysis, all of which are terrifying events. In today's video, I will be telling a range of scary stories. A huge thank you to the writers, whose links are in the description, for allowing me to share them with you. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Likes and comments are always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Oh, and the first story is a story of my own, since I know you guys like it when I do that from time to time. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. So a lot of you longtime subscribers know I get sleep paralysis on a regular basis. I thought I had told all of the interesting ones already, but I was recently reminded of a pretty terrifying event while talking with my little brother, and I knew I had to share it with you. This takes place about 7 or 8 years ago, making me roughly 15 or 16 at the time. It was an average night when I woke up, for lack of a better term, in sleep paralysis. It's not often I have visual hallucinations, but on this night, I did. Upon looking beside me, I saw a young girl, with black hair and pale skin, with a bluish tint. She appeared to have cut marks covering her face. This may sound terrifying, but with how much I get sleep paralysis, I wasn't bothered. I simply snapped myself out of it, went and got a midnight snack, and went back to bed. Yes, I am that used to sleep paralysis. No big deal, right? Well, there is more to the story. The very next night, my friends came over wanting to hang out. Before I continue, I'd like to add, I didn't tell any of them about the previous night's events. There were roughly 5 of us, when my friend says he has a Ouija board and wants to play it. Me, being the weirdo I am, said sure. So he went out to his car and grabbed it. We cleared out some space on my floor and couldn't quite clear out enough space for all 5 of us to be on it at once. I decided to sit the first round out. They went through the usual 4 circles and began asking questions. Starting off with, is anyone here with us? The planchette smoothly moved to yes. Of course, I'm thinking to myself, I bet one of them is messing with the rest. They then ask, how old are you? And the planchette moves to 7 and stops. Then they ask, are you dead? To which it moves again to yes. One of my friends then simply asks how. The planchette moves its way to C, then U, then T. Cut. Remembering the previous night, I was shocked. I didn't say anything immediately, thinking everyone would call BS. I'm not sure why I thought that, because my friends are thrilled by these types of things, and would have believed me without question. Before they could ask another question, the planchette moved to goodbye. We spent the rest of the night not getting any responses. Before everyone went home, I told them about my episode of sleep paralysis. My suspicions were correct. They were actually mad I didn't tell them right away, and thought it was cool or whatever. As I stated in the beginning, this was a long time ago, and I have yet to see the same entity again. Nothing ever came of it, making it a one-off event that proves only more my belief in the supernatural. There was a rumor in my hometown that I heard a long time ago. Everyone talked about it, but no one was brave enough to confirm if it was true or not. At least, not that I know of. Apparently, out in the middle of the countryside, there was a satanic church. Members of the church would go there and perform rituals, or whatever else they do. I tend to disregard rumors like that, since there was no proof to back it up. There were never any stories about it, just more rumors about the rumors, and so on. This rumor, however, was intriguing. I'm a curious person. I enjoy investigating, what the older folks in my town would consider snooping around. I don't consider it snooping though. I prefer collecting information. I was 16 when I first heard about it, so I was up to do just about anything, as long as it was entertaining. I thought about the rumor for a while. Where in the countryside? What do the members do there? What if the rumor is true? After asking a few other people about it, I knew I had to check it out. I mean, seriously, what could go wrong? I asked a few of my friends if they would like to tag along, and they, of course, said yes. Being rebellious teenagers and all, the idea of going on a mini road trip was exciting. Since the drive to the church was supposedly not that far, we didn't think to bring anything that we might have needed. We did bring a few flashlights and some food though. We didn't think about the possibility that we'd need weapons, like a knife or even pepper spray. Again, we didn't take the rumors seriously. The drive was about 15 minutes. The sky was starting to get darker, but it was still light enough to see without a flashlight. When we arrived at the church, I started feeling a bit nervous. I wasn't sure why, since I usually don't believe in stuff like this, but I knew I should trust my gut. I've been taught that since I was little, and this wasn't the time to disregard it. I drove everyone down there in my truck, so I had the keys. If anyone wanted to leave, they would have to ask me to drive them home. I was planning on staying there for a while, just to look around and see if there was any evidence that could prove the rumor is true. Since I felt weirded out and nervous about the idea of looking around an old, worn-down building, I was reluctant to get out of my truck. My friends practically had to drag me out. They could tell something was wrong with me, but they didn't think to ask. I also didn't want to bring down the mood, since everyone was so excited about it, for some reason. To be fair though, I was too, earlier in the day. The sky had become practically black by the time we decided to pack it up and leave. None of us found anything that we could take or use as evidence, which kind of left us leaving unsatisfied with our trip. We put our gear in the back and loaded into the truck. We were discussing where we should stop to eat on our way home, when I noticed a dark figure from the corner of my eye. I calmly looked over where I noticed it, thinking it was my imagination. It wasn't. When I looked over towards the figure, I saw it holding something in its hand. It was a long, thin object, almost like a stick. Apparently my face told everyone else that something was wrong. They all looked over where I was looking and quickly had the same look I did. More and more figures started appearing near the original one, all holding something in their hands. My heart was racing and I felt sick, almost nauseated. Luckily, I had already started the truck, so it didn't take long to get away from the building. I thought we were alright since there were no vehicles there besides mine. We weren't. I heard one of my friends squeal, almost as if it came from her vocal cords and not her voice. The noise sent shivers down my spine. Something else was wrong. I looked in my rearview mirror. They were running after us. Of course, they were only on their legs, so they couldn't catch up to us unless we stopped. I started picking up speed, trying to watch both the road and my rearview mirror. The next thing I heard was glass shattering and a collection of screams. I looked behind me and saw that the back glass of the truck was no longer there. I noticed a rock sitting on the floor under the seats. After about 2 more minutes of torture and panic, we lost them. The remaining 13 minutes were hell. We went through all of that, and with no evidence to prove it. I regretted not bringing a camera at that point. Actually, I regretted going down there at all. I told as many people as I could about what we saw and experienced, but no one believed us. I kind of knew that they wouldn't beforehand. We were only teenagers with excited imaginations and crazy stories. Why would they believe us? The only responses I got to my story were either telling me that it was a lie, or that we were stupid to go out there and check it out in the first place. I've started to get aggravated at everyone accusing me of being a liar. If I need evidence to prove what I saw was true, then I'll get it. I'll just be sure to bring my camera next time. Last night I had a nightmare that involved an entity that evoked a much stronger reaction from me than my usual dreams. What follows is a true story. The sky was overcast and it was neither night nor day. It was a time outside normal conventions. There was no apparent source of light and no visible shadows. The flat, gray sky brought a dullness that blanketed the scenery. There was an entity in my front yard, tall and completely black, and the edges of its form appeared fuzzy, like a shadow. His proportions were relatively normal for his height, except his perfectly round head and huge, perfectly round, white eyes. His piercing eyes are what I remember most vividly about him. The entity started spitting fire onto my house from one of his arms, the flames sprouting seamlessly from his arm, like a water hose. My front lawn had caught fire, but it had not yet reached my house. I started locking my door as it approached, and just when it was in arm's length, I got every lock closed. However, I watched them unlock themselves as the entity unlocked them from the outside. I tried calling for my parents, hysterically, to tell them something was getting into the house, but they dismissed me. This was the peak of my emotions. The fear of the intruder and the hopelessness my parents gave me drove me to tears. I sprinted to my basement, where there was a back door I could escape from, but I woke up. After waking, my fear subsided quickly, which is rather uncharacteristic. Even at my age, I tend to get paranoid at night still, but I chalked it up as a sign of maturity, checked the lock, and tried going back to sleep immediately. I was more angry that I was losing sleep, as I had had some trouble staying asleep earlier in the night. But the more I think about my instant relaxation, the more suspicious I become. Usually I would be wide-eyed, taking in every angle of my room, with my heart racing, especially for a dream so vivid and emotional. But after checking the lock, I didn't bother looking around the room. My eyes never adjusted to the darkness, and I just rolled over to go back to sleep. I genuinely think something lulled me into that relaxation, so that I would go back to sleep instead of surveying my room. It terrifies me to think that an entity entering my house in the dream could have allowed it access to my room. I had my suspicions that it was a demon. The emotions, my strange reactions and behavior, and the vivid memory of the entity. But later in the day I remembered what time it was when I awoke. 3 o'clock in the morning. There are superstitions that if one wakes up at 3 in the morning, then they are in the presence of a demonic entity. That was what convinced me I was visited by a demonic creature. At the age of 15, I was friends with a girl named Lily. Lily lived in my neighborhood, about a half-mile from my parents' house. Since her place was on the way home, we usually walked back together after school. It was the last week of October and unusually cold. It felt like winter. The neighborhood trees were shedding, and I found myself wading through a sea of leaves as we walked up her driveway. A row of smiling jack-o'-lanterns greeted us from the front porch, and the yard was dotted with fake gravestones. On this particular afternoon, the rest of her family was out doing something. There were no cars in the driveway, and the house looked empty. Lily's dad was a dentist, and her mom was an attorney, so their house was gigantic. It was a 3-story home with a big basement, painted pale gray with a black trim. The roof was tall and steep, and the windows had old-fashioned wood shutters. It must have been built 100 years ago, and it clearly had character. The place was kept in good shape, but still undeniably old. We headed around the side of the house to the back door. In the backyard, 3 or 4 cats were draped lazily over various pieces of patio furniture. There were even more inside. A pair of piercing yellow eyes locked on to me from inside the kitchen window, as another jet black cat stood stationary on the windowsill, above the sink. Her mom was something of a crazy cat lady. Lily pulled a key out of her backpack and unlocked the door. We headed up to her room to play around on her Super Nintendo. After about an hour, we heard music coming from downstairs. This wouldn't have been that strange, except that we were the only ones in the house. We both thought someone had gotten home, so we checked the driveway, but there were no cars. We listened quietly for a minute or so, as the music continued. It sounded like classical music from what we could hear. Finally, we decided it was in our best interest to go investigate. When we got down to the main floor, it became evident that it was piano music. The source was not immediately apparent. I remember that Lily's dad had a nice stereo system, so at the moment I figured that was where the music was coming from. When I looked over at Lily, however, I could see the look of horror on her face as she started towards the kitchen. "What is it?" I asked her. "We have a piano in the basement," she said weakly. "My grandmother's." The words struck my heart like a flash of lightning. Lily continued. "She used to live here with us until last winter, but the piano, none of us even know how to play it. It's covered in a sheet." We both slowly walked to the kitchen where the door to the basement was located. The old wooden door, painted a dull beige, was ajar. We stared down the steps, which extended into the blackness of the basement. Exquisite piano music poured loudly from the darkness. There was no doubt about it. Someone was in the basement playing the piano. I could hear the resonance of the sustain in the wood, the foot pedals thumping between measures, the gentle clack of the keys. Whoever it was, they were playing beautifully. We both stood at the door for what seemed like an eternity, listening to the sad piano music droning up from the basement. We nervously whispered back and forth what to do next. Neither of us really wanted to go and see who was down there playing. After what seemed like hours had passed, I finally gathered the courage to shout down the stairs. The only thing that jumped into my head was, who's down there? The music stopped abruptly. Lily and I stood there in the kitchen, not breathing, staring at each other's faces. The silence echoed in my ears. Lily took a timid step forward and flicked on the light switch located near the top of the steps. After a couple metallic clicking noises and a buzz, the lights flickered on just out of view at the bottom of the steps. We went down into the basement together, and as you might imagine, the room was empty, save for a gaunt wooden piano covered in a white sheet. We investigated the room together. Lily checked one side of the room near the piano. There was a rusted washer and dryer combo off to the side, and next to that a deep ceramic sink with a long crack in the basin. No evidence of anyone or anything nearby. I checked the back end of the basement, where there was a stack of old-time magazines bound tightly in a twine. Then I noticed the basement door that led to the backyard. The door was slightly open, just enough for me to see through the gap to the outside. I opened it up to the concrete stairway with an iron banister. Just then a gust of wind picked up a torrent of leaves, sending them skidding down the alley nearby. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked wildly. There was nobody there. Growing up as an only child definitely has its benefits, but it can get very lonely, especially as a child. I am an only child and have always wanted a sibling. Don't get me wrong, my parents spend a lot of time with me, and make sure I'm never feeling neglected. However, if I'm going to be honest, it really isn't the same. I was born in a very small town. The population was only about 40 and was mostly filled with much older people. When I was 5, we decided to move away. We found a house in a lovely town that seemed to be more busy. My parents love meeting new people. I can't say I feel the same. We found an older house that was pretty cheap. Not knowing any of the history, we thought it was a great buy. We bought the house and moved in as soon as we could. The house gave me a very weird vibe. The house looked like nobody had set foot in it for 10 years. The paint was peeling off the walls and the floorboards were really loud and creaky. The one thing that weirded us out the most was the closed off area in the backyard. We figured it was closed off for a reason and didn't bother to investigate. 6 months later, we adapted to the house. I had started school but struggled to make friends. Everyone was just too overwhelming for me. Most kids go through an imaginary friend stage at some point, but this wasn't your typical imaginary friend. I remember exactly how I met her. Every day, after school, I would play in the backyard. There was an open shelter area that I always went in. I would read, draw, anything to entertain myself. That day I decided I wanted to draw with the new chalk I had just bought. I was drawing for a few minutes when I got that feeling that someone or something was watching me. I turned around and to my surprise, I saw someone or something. It looked to be a girl, about a few years older than me. She had very pale skin, almost like a vampire's. Black hair, blue lips, black eyes. Those black eyes. She just stared at me through the gap of the fence that we never went in. This happened nearly every time I went outside. Most children my age would be terrified, but I actually found her quite calming. I eventually decided to try and talk to her. She didn't reply back. She never talked, but for some reason I could understand what she would say. My parents figured it was an imaginary friend and left it at that. 4 years had passed and I still was talking to the girl. My parents started trying to convince me to hang out with friends after school, instead of sitting by myself every afternoon. But I didn't want to. I liked being with her. My parents had booked me into 3 different counselors. None of them helped. My parents decided to move. They wanted me to become more social. You know, it's not healthy to be doing this every day, my mom would often say. But for some reason, I never said goodbye to the girl on the fence. Our last 2 weeks at that house, I didn't talk to her anymore. She would watch me still. I started having nightmares about her and seeing her in my mirror. I'm currently 15. Recently, my parents and I were talking about old memories from when I was younger. Do you remember ever having an imaginary friend? My dad asked as we were eating breakfast. No, not that I can remember, I answered. My mom and dad looked at each other. I remember you always used to play with a girl. You used to have nightmares about her too, my mom said. Apparently she had black eyes. I paused, trying to remember. It finally came to me. That night I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was that girl. I decided for some reason to search up that house, see if I could find anything interesting about her. I scrolled and scrolled, until I came across the first owners of the house. The first owners had a daughter the age of 8. I scrolled and scrolled. Nothing. Wait. I scrolled back up. My heart sunk into my chest. I didn't know what to feel at this moment. This is what I read. The 2 owners had a daughter. However, she tragically passed away as she fell into the fireplace and was burnt alive. The parents buried her in the backyard and built a fence around it, to pay respects to Annie. Please do not go into that area. I clicked on her name. It came up with a bunch of information on her. Photos, videos, drawings she had done. She looked exactly like the girl I had seen for 4 years. Black hair, pale skin. It all made sense. On the website there was a section where you could write about Annie. I was shocked to read that a lot of people that lived in the house had children that claimed to see a girl that matched that description perfectly. I'm just glad that I wasn't the only person to see her. We don't go to the barn anymore, I told my friends as we walked home from school. Something happened and I don't know how to explain it. We just don't go. Why not? What happened? We always go to the barn. My friends and I would go to my grandpa's abandoned barn and have fires out back and practically made the barn our clubhouse. It was actually really cool. My friends and I actually put some solid work into it and got the power going there. We had a cool rope ladder and a small TV hooked up. We were even working on making a zip line that ran from the loft to the lake. Our summers up at the barn were awesome. We would hardly go up during the fall or winter, but since we just got power going, and we wanted to get a heater hooked up and have some sweet sleepovers, the barn was basically a better substitute to the typical treehouse. We just changed the empty shell of the barn to a guy pad. The barn was littered with random tools and my grandpa still used them, so we had to leave the tools in their place, but most of them were in the loft of the barn, and we hardly went up there anyway. In fact, we never went up there. It was really old and unsafe, so we just worked on the lower levels, and eventually we were able to get a few couches in there. We just had Halloween and we were anticipating Thanksgiving, and we wanted to have a quick hangout before we had to leave for the break. Instead of all of our friends, we were only able to have me, my brother, and my neighbor Gabe, which was not even half of the friends we would normally hang out with. So just the three of us, but we were still able to have a good time. We went to a late movie and afterwards we went back to my house. We had our stuff already packed, so we weren't at home long. It was neat since we could barely see the barn from my house, which was nice, but it was still out in a field, and took a solid 5 minutes to get there. We normally would take an ATV or my brother's souped up golf carts, but for some reason we didn't. Before we left, we noticed that the barn illuminated a very dull yellow glow from the barn. I showed my brother and we were both uneasy. This hadn't been the first time we accidentally left a light on, and our dad got pissed and made us turn it off at 2 in the morning on a school night. Needless to say, we were pretty good with turning off the lights after that. So to see the light on was more concerning, since our dad would be on our asses if he saw the light on. But he was out of town and didn't freak out too much. This is where it gets weird. As we were walking to the barn, we noticed that the warm glow to the barn then faded and blended in with the late night sky. The light was off. My brother was pissed considering we had just got a heater to work there, and he figured that the power went out. We finished our walk and went into our barn, and my brother immediately checked the power. Like clockwork, the barn lit up, and we got the heater cranked since it was freezing out. The heater normally takes a while to get warm, but this puppy was already warm. I told Gabe since he and I were good friends, and since my brother was busy working on getting the old TV to work. We were uneasy, but things didn't click till we were about to go to sleep. Once my brother fell asleep, Gabe and I began to talk about what happened earlier. The barn was very open and we could pretty much see everything except the old loft upstairs. We both were thinking the same thing, but we weren't sure if anyone was in the barn since it was dark out, and if someone ran out we wouldn't have been able to see them anyway. As we walked to the top, we noticed that there was a tool room with a lock on the door. We both laughed since we knew that no one would be able to get in the room, and put the lock on the outside. But our laughter didn't last for long. We looked around and there were wrappers all over the floor. Not just wrappers, but cans and bags full of random clothes. Our hearts sank as we looked at each other and then at the door. We then got closer to the lock and noticed the lock was not only unlocked but broken. We were so curious, yet so scared at the time. I reached for the door and Gabe grabbed my arm. Wait, what if someone is in there? I don't know. Ask them to leave? You're an idiot. They aren't just going to leave. I looked around and noticed the door handle had a huge keyhole. Let's just take a photo through the keyhole and see if we can see anything. Reluctantly, I agreed and Gabe took a photo through the keyhole. He looked at it for a minute and laughed. Might help if I put the flash on. Nice, I said, half sarcastically, half terrified. He took 3 photos and we looked at them simultaneously. Our blood ran cold. The unthinkable was waiting on the other side. Not only waiting, but watching through the door, as if it was anticipating us to open it. It wasn't really a person. It was this strange doll woman. Was it a life-size doll? I went to open the door and Gabe grabbed me again. We looked at the other photos and the person moved to a different position behind a box. We didn't look at the other one. We just booked it down the stairs and woke up my brother while screaming. He was irritated at first, but our fears seemed to freak him out, and he began to grab our stuff while I hid all the lights I could on the way out. We showed my brother once we got home and he began to cry. We all did. Our mom was the only one home and she was dead asleep, since it was almost 3 in the morning. We locked all our doors and grabbed our .22s, and locked our door. We slept with the lights on that night. We never really got over it. Who was that person? Why was she dressed like that? How long had she been there? What would have happened if we opened the door? I tried explaining this to my friends, but it didn't really hit them, till I showed them the photos from that night. That's why we don't go to the barn anymore. Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you enjoyed the video. I figured I would take this opportunity to just talk to you guys for a second because it's been so long since I've done that. I don't have much to talk about. I figured I'd just like bounce some ideas back and forth with you guys. First, just thank you guys so much for all the support. I don't want to drone on and on and on about it, but to think that we were demonetized for 4 months, I mean, this channel took a hit. Like, I deleted everything for what turned out to be no reason, and for those 4 months, I just thought, like, that was it. That was the end of Slumber Reads. YouTube didn't want me on the platform anymore, and that was just gonna be that. And I'm so glad that I'm back, and we're having fun, we're telling some scary stories. It feels like old times. Like, I feel so motivated. I'm probably more motivated right now than I've ever been. And I'm really excited about that. The support you guys give me is definitely a huge playing factor in, you know, making it through that 4 months and continuing what I'm doing now. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. I really mean it. You guys have helped me through a lot. I think we're getting a little bit too sentimental. Alright, some ideas. I want to start bringing on some smaller narrators for collabs. And I know this channel has never been known for its collabs. Like, I don't even really feature on other people's channels. But I kind of feel like this sense of wanting to be more involved. So I'm curious to know if I was to start bringing on some newer narrators and giving them a feature on the channel, would you guys like that? You know, it'd be a chance for you guys to find out some undiscovered talent. I'll probably bring on some larger people as well. Just have fun with it and, you know, tell some scary stories. Definitely let me know. And I also want to start writing more fictional stories for the channel as well. A lot of you newer people might not know this. A lot of you older subscribers definitely will. When this channel was smaller, a lot of the creepypastas and fictional stories on this channel were written by me. Like, I spent a lot of time writing stories, and I just haven't been doing that as much lately, so I want to start doing that a lot more too. I'm not really asking for advice on that, I just figured I'd say it in a video so that I'll actually do it. So, I just hope you guys looking forward to that, because it's definitely going to happen. Yeah, we recently hit 33,000 subs, and that's a third of 100K. What the hell? I know numbers aren't everything, and in the grand scheme of things, there's so many YouTubers with millions of subs. I'm sure 33K doesn't sound like a lot, but to me, that is insane. I never thought the channel that I created, the channel that I worked hard for, would have 33K. That's just, man, that is wild. Take with that what you will. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm gloating or whatever. I'm just really excited. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Otherwise, I'm going to start droning on for 10, 20, 30 minutes like I have in the past at the end of videos. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the stories, and I hope you guys have a great night. And I'll see you guys in 2 days for another video. That's actually another thing I wanted to bring up. There will be a video every other day. I kind of told myself that would happen when I got remonetized. I had to take a 6-day break because my computer broke, and then I had to delete one of my more recent videos because YouTube had a glitch on it. Still don't know what's up with that. It is what it is. I actually featured the story that got cut off by YouTube in this video, so for those of you that missed it, there you go. Alright, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys have a great night, and I'll talk to you later.